We all know that governments and big business are absolutely addicted to immigration numbers going up. I mean, it's a simple equation, really. Bigger population. What does a bigger population mean? Well, a bigger population means more tax revenue for state and federal governments. And of course, it means more people, means more consumption, people buying things, building houses, all of that entails. But as life slowly returns to normal in the wake of the pandemic, one of the biggest economic issues up for discussion is immigration. A number of submissions are now being released to the government, one called a migration system for Australia's future. But are we going down the right path? Joining me now, as I said, is Judith Sloan. Very nice to catch up with you again.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
I'm great. Governments are addicted to migration, aren't they?
They seem to be, and it seems sadly very much bipartisan policy. So obviously we had the disruption of that pandemic and migration numbers fell dramatically. But it now looks as though we're going to be back to where we were pre-pandemic and possibly, indeed more than possibly likely, we will have higher numbers coming in net terms. So I feel it was a lost opportunity because I think the surveys tell you that the majority of the public would be happier with a smaller migrant intake. But governments and, as you said, big businesses and other vested interests have other ideas.
Government probably gets away with it a little bit now, Judith, because every shop you go to, every retailer you talk to says, I can't find staff. I can't open up on a Monday because I can't find the staff to serve tables, that argument. So the government saying, I want to bring more people into the country, probably it's easier for them to sell that message. But is there not some way, and has anyone ever looked, Judith, at the idea that you say to someone who wants to come here as a migrant, yep, you can come, no problem. But for the first 4 years, you're not able to live in somewhere like Melbourne or Sydney or South East Queensland. You've got to go to regional Australia, take your skills there, and then think about moving.
Well, I think there are two important points to pick up there, Steve. Most advocates of high migration tell us we need to focus on skilled migration. So, opening up the cafe or the retail shop, that we're not talking about skilled migration there. And I think there's a bigger question or a bigger debate there about how we entice locals to take some of these jobs because, everyone agrees that if we are going to have a large migrant intake, you want it to be focused on skilled migrants and not unskilled migrants. Mind you, just in brackets, the international student numbers, which are actually higher now than pre-pandemic levels, they do in fact generate a huge supply of unskilled labour. And, I think a lot of the employers do actually welcome that a great deal. I think in terms of trying to get people to go to the regions, now, this has been on the table for many, many years. And
you and I are old enough to remember when we tried to populate Albury Wodonga, and that was going to be the new centre of Australia.
Decentralisation, weren't we? But,
yep.
We don't build rabbit fences. And the previous government did have a sort of a regional visa program. They seem to have very limited success, as a matter of fact. I mean, people, I think, legitimately want to go to where they already have connections. And because those connections are largely in Melbourne, Sydney and the southeast corner of Queensland, that's where the vast majority of them go. I'd be happy to see a more regionally focused visa arrangement, but I won't be holding my breath in terms of how successful it's going to be.
I mean, the big issue, of course, and, people who are against a bigger migration number is infrastructure. I mean, we've looked at what's been spent in Sydney, but that was really 30 years of catch-up. In Melbourne, you can't you can't drive down a road in Melbourne where you don't come across some government infrastructure project that's taken over half of the street. So the infrastructure is still way behind what's required if we're suddenly going to see a place like Melbourne become the biggest city in Australia.
Well, I think that's right. And I think the pro-migration advocates would say, we just need better planning with infrastructure. But the truth of the matter is that there has been a lot of infrastructure spending over the past decade. And what we have seen basically is massive cost blowouts and massive delays. I mean, that second river crossing, I mean, who knows when that's going to be finished.
Disaster.
We've got the metro work. And we're talking about literally billions and billions of dollars in overruns. So, it's worth asking the question, at what rate do we want to expand, which requires expensive infrastructure, or do we want to moderate that rate of expansion so we can kind of, as you say, catch up and deal with it in a more modest way?
Love picking your brain. Can I ask you about China and the GDP growth there? Worse in 50 years, going from, I think, 8% in 2021 to 3% last year. What impact's that likely to have on us?
Well, I think there are two ways of looking at it. I mean, it has a really big impact on the world economy. I mean, China is Australia's biggest trading partner by a very long way, but it is also the biggest trading partner of a lot of other countries. So it's not just in terms of what impact it has directly on Australia, it is on those other countries. But by the same token, I think Australia, and people don't realise this, we're pretty lucky at the moment because we have a suite of minerals and natural gas, which the world wants and which China wants. So iron ore, as I said, the natural gas, coal, dare I say, and of course all the minerals associated with electrification and decarbonisation. So in many ways, Australia is doing well out of that. But any slowing in the world economy won't be helpful to our overall economy.
Yeah, I just saw someone in the previous program talking about how the world's going to have to mine a lot more copper and we're going to have all of those minerals required to make batteries. That should put us in a very healthy place, shouldn't it?
Yes, no, there was an interesting piece by Nick Cater about how Kalgoorlie is absolutely booming, and not for the traditional reasons, not the old gold town. It's now basically got the whole suite of rare earth and other metals that is required, for example, of electric vehicle batteries and large-scale grid batteries and the like. So in many ways, we are in a sweet spot because of that, but that doesn't make us immune from broader economic issues.
Judith, great to catch up. Thanks a lot for your help.
Pleasure, Steve.